I think it's appropriate if the presentation stirred some memories or something that you would like to share here at this time with this group. I mean, memories will come out after as we gather and stuff there, but if there's something that you would like to say to this entire group as it's assembled, feel free. John?
Yeah, I'm John Paul Yoder, son of fifth child of Paul and Blossom. And I'm glad to be here today to celebrate Jan. I was a young one, so my memory of the larger-than-life cousins is non-existent. We moved back to Goshen before I really knew any of them. It wasn't until, I think, the reunion in 2002 where I had the opportunity to kind of reconnect some way after moving back to Oregon, and had a chance to talk to Jan briefly, but never really knew him. And I actually came in contact with him through his work. And so I just thought maybe I would share that branch of Jan that I knew. So I did some research similar to what I had done earlier. And he was professor at University of Colorado. He belonged to the American Society of Mechanical Engineers, American Consulting Engineers Council, American Society for Engineering Education, Solar Education Society, Society of Heating, Refrigerating, and AC Engineers, and Association of Engineers, Energy Engineers. So that was kind of the circles that he moved in. He had publications, over 12 books on renewable energy technologies, and that's what he was one of the experts on, and had done some consulting in Germany and other places, and was a national expert in that arena. So he was a well-known person, and actually I came across Googling energy engineers, and bang, up came Jan Kreider, and I thought, wow, that's kind of interesting.
Wow.
I was looking for a presenter for a lecture series that I organized in Salem, and so I contacted him in Boulder, and he agreed. We flew him up here, and he did a presentation on the life cycle of cars, I think it was, about from the beginning to end, what all goes into that. There was not many people in the U.S. at that time that were doing that kind of research. So I got to know him through visiting with him and spending time with him when he came up to do that. He was active research in neural networks, artificial intelligence, monitoring diagnostic systems, building energy prediction methods, photovoltaic systems, building to earth thermocoupling, and more. So he was a genius. I mean, he was an expert in these arenas at a national and international level. He traveled the world. He was proficient in French, knew some Italian, and was a very accomplished person in that. So that was a branch maybe that folks didn't know a lot about. That was his work and his life passion. And that was where I came in to know Jan and visit with Jan and have a lot of respect for Jan. He was a supporter of environmental education, and I was proud to have that opportunity to get to know him in kind of those connections.
Thanks, John.
Yeah, I'm Justin, and at the opposite end of the renewable energy spectrum, I knew the big, huge muscle car engine part of Jan a little bit. I got to touch that, so I got to know him first through the big talk stories of my dad. So I got some of that larger than life God description just kind of shared with me before I ever met him. And I met him a few times, and there was a period when I came back to Portland from the East Coast, and my dad and Jan and I were just emailing together every day about just all kinds of different things, and it was a really fun time. And I was just getting into muscle cars myself, and I would always be emailing these classifieds for cars. He would always say, "Oh, that's garbage. You shouldn't get that. That's a piece of trash. That's a mess. Don't do." And so I could never find a car that he would approve of until one day I sent him a classified. It was for, I think it was for a 1967 Corvette. It had a big 427 big block engine, tri-carb, black chrome, gorgeous, and he responded, he said, nice. He said, that's a car worth having. And that's the only time I ever got that from him. But I learned a lot from cars, and I really enjoyed sort of exploring that branch of his life. And I'm glad to have confirmed here today, beyond dispute, that he did have airplane hangars full of cars in Colorado. So thanks.
So I'm Jordan, so Valerie's son. Dottie was my grandmother, and Jan was my grandfather. But I only knew him as Papa Nono. So I hear Jan, and it's familiar to me, but Papa Nono evokes the image of Jan in my mind much more than the name Jan itself does. So I didn't inherit the Yoder storytelling capability, but I'll share some funny things, that experiences I had with Jan as my grandfather, and as someone who, as an engineer, I got to talk about the sciences and experience that, part of his life. So I was on the grandson tree branch, as it were, and the engineering side. So as a kid, my mom mentioned he would come up and run, my dad would invite him to the school, and he'd run science experiments with the class every few years. And I joked that he was trying to blow us up, but it wasn't too far from that. So one time he came up with my class, and he made a solar oven, and I think we're all in 3rd or 4th grade, and we thought that was the coolest thing in the world, and he did too, because it was using the sun, and just the ability to kind of teach and interact with all these kids who were just having a blast with science was, I think, so fun to him. So he came up and we made a solar oven, and that was so successful, the school kept asking him back, kind of outside of us. And so the next few years he would come back, and every time it was something a little bit hotter, a little bit more explosive, he was a lifelong chemical engineer, and he told me stories of when he and his buddies would play pranks on people in chemical engineering school. So every year it kind of felt like he was proverbially flying closer and closer to the sun, until they would eventually not invite him back to the one funny story I remember was in college. He said, I was in mechanical engineering school, and of course, he always knew way more about the topics I was telling him about than I knew, even though I was in school. And I said, oh, well, why don't I send you one of my lab reports I've been working on, and you can tell me what you think. And so some of these lab reports I didn't put a lot of effort into in school, but there was one that I felt, okay, I really put a lot of effort into this, and I didn't want to send him anything that wasn't good, because I knew he really knew his stuff, and he always knew more than me. So I sent this to him, and I thought, okay, this is one I really put a lot of effort into, and this is impressive, so he'll think this is really great. And he writes me back in typical Jan fashion, I think it was a sentence, and he says, nice lab report, period. Most of it's wrong, though. And so I came out, and I saw him soon after in Boulder, and I said, what was it with that lab report? And he says, well, I don't know what they taught you in that class, but most of it's not really right. And so he spent about an hour telling me, why the teacher taught me what was wrong in my mechanical engineering class. And I went back to my teacher. My teacher was kind of dumbfounded. It turns out Jan had some pretty good points, so he was right. So that was a funny memory.
Wow.
One memory that is more about generosity than being funny is I regrettably didn't get to talk to him too much about cars, and I know Jan had this huge passion for cars that dominated a huge amount of his life. But growing up, I wasn't so much into cars, and so in getting into high school, I started getting into cars a little bit. I wasn't so mechanical. I wasn't under the hood wrenching on things, and that was, I think, when Jan was doing the most of that in the early 2000s with the students of his, and working out in Greeley at his 2 airplane hangars. But I started getting into building these off-roading cars, and so I got this new car my parents helped me buy, and Jan had come out and was visiting us that weekend, and I was online on eBay and looking for superchargers to put on my engine, because I thought that was the coolest thing. Go faster and louder, and that's what you'd like when you're 17 years old and you're just getting in the car. So he starts looking at them with me, and I learned, I had no idea, but he is like a master of eBay. he would set up all these tools and things that would snipe people on eBay and get all. He was a master of. He knew everything about eBay. So he goes on eBay and he's looking at these superchargers, and I'm telling him all about it. And he leaves for the weekend, and I kind of figured that was that. A few months later, this thing shows up, and not only did he buy it for the car, he helped and went and got it put in. And we'd spent a lot of time talking about this, and that was actually one of the things that kind of catalyzed my interest in cars, because it kind of broke the barrier for me of, oh, this stuff's too complicated, to, oh my gosh, now I know what this, and that was, he didn't even have a second thought about buying it for me and working on it with me. And I think that really just speaks to his generosity and his interest in what he really liked, which was kind of inspiring that type of thought with people who show interest in things. So that was really great. And I'll share one more story, which I think is also pretty funny, which is once I graduated college, I started working on robotics, which is what I really liked, and was something that grabbed Jan's attention because he'd always ask me about it. And 2 years after school, I got what for me at the time was my dream job, which was working at a self-driving car company. And so I sent this email to my parents. I said, oh, I got this really cool job. I'm so excited about it. And Jan was on the email thread, and he wrote me back, and he said, well, tell me about it, give me the blurb. And I told him just what the recruiter had told me, which is, oh, it's this, and it's changing the world in this way. And he wrote back something very terse, and he said, wow, that's cool. Sounds like bullshit. and it was so funny, but he had so much interest in this. We ended up spending a lot of time talking about this stuff over the years, and he knew way more than me still, even after I was working at this place. And he didn't spend much time working on self-driving and AI. He still knew more, and he'd ask me questions that were real stumpers. But I look back on that email now, which was an emotional experience for me, because I regret not communicating with him more about this stuff. Fantastic. And I look back on it and I read the email I wrote, and I went, yeah, that was bullshit. Jen was right. He knew it right off the bat. So I thought those were good stories. Thank you.
Yeah, that's great.
Thank you.
Those are good stories, Jordan.
I'm going to stand up because I can't see all of you behind me to just very briefly say how much I appreciate what Valerie and Chris have said about Jan. As you may know, I'm his younger brother, and I knew him very well as we grew up, but I didn't know him well after he left and went to college. As you know, he could be a very private person. And so just in the few minutes that we sat here, well, maybe it was a half hour, I don't know. But we've heard about the other domain of Jan. And it is so complex and so sometimes very compartmentalized, but he was just a great human being, as I knew him and as I think all of you knew him. As all of us humans, we're far from perfect, and yet we all have something that we can bring to each other, and certainly Jan did that. So that's sort of all I'll say at this point. You have memories that are unique to your experience with Jan, but I will say, just since we're kind of living in the moment today, that one thing that it really impressed me, about half of you were here when this happened, is where's Justin? Where are you? Back there in the hat. Justin went flying by here, and Chris said, where is he going? And he goes down. I didn't know who it was. And we see him turn around, and Chris said, yeah, I think he was driving too fast. Justin comes back in here, turns a corner, and does a flourish that rearranged the gravel out there. It's now in a big pile. Drove in, did another flourish, and there sits his Pontiac. That was Jan. When he was growing up.
Well, in '79, my two boys graduated from high school, and so we rented a motorhome. My wife had a 3-week vacation, and we took off across, went up, hit Highway 2 and went across, and I said, we're going to go to Boulder and see Jan. So we did, and we called him up, and So he took us out for dinner and went to pay. Oh, no, 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 no. You don't pay when you come and visit me. I pay. We had a real good time. It was great. He took us to a restaurant that he said he ate at all the time. He recommended this place, and it was great. I really enjoyed it.
That's a great.
I
had
didn't-
trouble visiting Jan in Boulder when he was older. He didn't necessarily feel comfortable, so I'm glad you got to go there. Ed.
Yeah,
That's a good story.
yeah.
I'm curious about all these other angles of branches because I'm not interested in cars and science kind of is over my head. But I knew Jan, I thought quite well because he was a foodie, a major foodie.
Yeah.
And I appreciated what Valerie had to say about he and Dottie's relationship, and that's what I really related to him. I remember just being a high school kid and this god comes to the our big round table to visit, and he says, I'm going to cook the meal. And he made this sort of a Mexican, it was like taco thing, and he spent all afternoon. It was just like hamburger, but he had this spice and that spice, and he sat there and tasted. And I was like, I was so impressed. And that was like my relationship with Jan, was talking about foods, and once in a while he would send me the spice that he was kind of excited about. And I have to tell this funny story because some of the refreshments are related to this. I had he and Dottie over for dinner once. I didn't have him over very often, and I was kind of scared. And we had, my boyfriend and I are into wines, and we've tasted the best wines in the world. And so we knew that Jan was a connoisseur, and so was Dottie. And so we had some really fine wines. But my boyfriend is also a bottom fisher. And a bottom fisher means he likes to go to the grocery store and buy the cheapest wines possible. And taste one and find a characteristic that is just right, and which really competes with these high-end wines. So we would often have these dinners with these high-end wines and bottom, things that we got from the grocery store. And we had he and Dottie over one day, time for dinner, and we were eating these fine wines, and then we were kind of getting into this bottom fish. We called it Sandy because it had the sandy glass on it. We really liked it, and Dottie didn't like it. And we had loosened up at that time. She said, I don't like this wine. And then she accidentally broke the glass. And it was a really expensive Riedel. And it was like, felt so terrible because she's so elegant and, just so not Dottie. But we chewed and chewed over that one. We'd have dinners together with it. I don't like this wine. Clank. So in remembrance of Dottie and Jan and their fine taste, I got us, I think, a really nice champagne and some nice glasses. And I hope we can remember
And you hope
them.
nobody breaks it?
No, you can break it.
I've had a lot of time to talk with a real quick memory and stuff. Dottie, because I love Dottie. She came out here with Jan, and she was a flower. She was beautiful, and I was in that house where she sewed. The whole thing was full of sewing machines and stuff at the beach house. But the last time I saw her, Janet and I had dinner together, and we finished the fine wines and meals, and I'm not a big foodie. And we were standing on the sidewalks up there in Portland on a night, an evening like this, and Dottie and Janet were singing, and they broke into song, and they were singing old songs together, and that's my memory of Dottie. She was really precious, and we miss her so much at the beach house. She added. It's often she gets overshadowed by Jan, but she was there. She was a real character. I loved her to this day.
I just have a quick memory. I was thinking of, I'm not a car person at all. I drive a minivan. But I even have a car connection with Jan.
Oh, wow.
So he got my dad into the Prius early on, like the first year it was sold in the US, and then shortly after we got a Prius too. So there was like a car connection with Jan too. And then also just for a little while he stored his Mercedes, I think, at our house in the garage, and then he would come get it and go to the beach house and stuff. But that's my little...
Yeah, I got to ride in that Mercedes a couple of times.
Yeah, that was a good car.
I think he got us a Prius too, so
Yeah.
thanks, Jan.
Yep.
Yeah.
But it's funny that Jan with his team went down to that Bonneville Flats down there in Arizona, and they set the land speed record for the Prius. They broke some record.
Is that right?
They raced that thing across.
Is that true?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Corroborate that.
He
All
sent
right.
me the video of it. Jan Kreider's team won the land speed world record for Prius, you know.
Man.
Jeez.
Well, maybe the memories can continue to
Yeah.
flow once we move there, but I want to close us in here by coming back and
No,
yeah,
Oh, okay.
and getting these ashes into the ground. And so, Justin, I'm going to ask you to come up here to be a graveside assistant.
All right.
And Valerie, if you could come up and take Dorothy's, these are her ashes here. And we want to get them down in there. And
Not dropping it and spilling it and everything.
yeah, I'm thinking maybe
Oh, they're
just
not too
take
bad.
them over there and hand them to Justin, and he can, because you're going to have to kneel down.
She's pretty good at that. I
Okay,
saw
great.
her.
Okay,
Yeah.
go for it then.
If I can kneel down with this in my, now that, we're gonna set it down so that I don't drop it. Okay.
Okay.
Now maybe I'll slide it over so you can.
No, it goes on that side.
Oh, it
'cause
goes on
there-
this side?
There's a
Okay.
label on the front of the vault
Oh,
that has
okay.
Dottie on it there.
Okay. all right,
Perfect,
very good.
perfect.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
You're welcome.
Jerry, you come to the other side. I'll move this knee pad over here. A little heavier.
They are heavy.
Yeah, Jan's ashes were a lot heavier than all that food.
When I was sending them through the post office, and they did it wrong the first time, but whoa, this one's really heavy. I said, yeah, he was a big guy.
You shipped those to the post office?
Yeah, you're gonna do the gluing very special
Okay,
way.
Janet.
I'm taking them. You get it
The
too
first
now.
time the woman who was doing it didn't know it, so.
Now we need to